Have you ever wondered why just a little while ago you could walk for hours without feeling tired, and now even rising from a chair makes you pause just to catch your breath? Is it that we're getting weaker, or could it be something deeper, quietly shifting beneath the surface? This video is for our older friends, those who now walk slower, but perhaps live deeper. If you've ever sat in silence on a quiet afternoon and felt your heart grow heavy for no clear reason, then stay with us. Before we begin, if any of this touches something inside you, please leave a heartfelt comment or simply hit subscribe so we know you're still here and still living, fully, quietly, and truly. Have you ever sat alone on an early morning when the whole house was still asleep, your hand brushing the corner of an old tablecloth, and suddenly your heart sank just a little? Not from sadness, but because something deeply familiar had quietly returned. A scent, a faint sound from the radio downstairs, or just the soft clink of a glass touching porcelain. Like the way she used to set out tea every morning, even though he preferred to drink it after 7. We used to begin our days with a leap, no thinking, no planning. A phone call came, we got in the car. Family dinner, we cooked, we served, we laughed. And then, nothing dramatic happened. Just one day as we bent down to tie our shoelaces, we paused, longer than usual. One afternoon, standing on the balcony, a breeze brushed the back of our neck, and we shivered without knowing why. No one names that moment, no bell rings. But we know something in the body, perhaps in the soul, has quietly shifted, as if a door inside has just begun to open. No noise, just softly, but unmistakably enough that we can't ignore it. It doesn't say, "You're getting old." It simply whispers, "You're coming home." Not home as in your hometown or childhood, but home to a version of yourself that once felt whole, before the weight of roles defined you, before you had to stay strong all the time, back when the sound of rain on a tin roof was enough to bring peace. Maybe it's been a long time since you sat in stillness, without guilt. No pressure to do anything, no need to prove anything, just sitting and realizing you are still here. You know, some things don't require youth to feel. They only need a moment of quiet, and suddenly you'll see that whole and tender part of you never truly left. It was just that you wandered too far from it. And maybe today, if you're hearing these words, it's not to learn something new, but simply to remember something you once knew, but somehow forgot. Something strange happens in life, quietly, without warning. Just one by one, little things, familiar faces, old routines slip away. One day you pick up your phone, scroll through your contacts, and realize how strangely silent it's become. Not because no one calls, but because it's been a long time since you called anyone too. There was a time when every Sunday morning, Anne, your dear friend from the teaching days, would send a message. "Tea today?" When was the last time she asked? Conversations no longer begin with a ringtone, but with silence. The friend who once walked with you every afternoon rarely leaves the house these days. The one who used to sit with you at the corner cafe moved to another state last year. And there's something else that's quietly faded, something you only notice much later: the presence of others. No one's waiting on the front steps anymore. No familiar car pulling into the driveway. No one looking at you with a half smile saying, "You never used to forget things like this." Loss doesn't always come as death. Sometimes it's just distance, growing wider, and no one quite knows how to bridge it. We're not angry, just everyone's busy. And then, one evening, you sit down to dinner with 2 bowls, only to remember, tonight it's just you. I once heard an older friend say, "That evening, I still made 2 cups of tea like always," then suddenly froze, remembering she passed away last spring. Not all pain makes a sound. Some cracks are only heard in silence. Maybe you've been there too, setting an extra pair of chopsticks out of habit, sitting near the door, just in case someone returns. Turning on the radio, not to listen, but so the house doesn't feel so quiet. And strangely, within those absences, there isn't only emptiness. There is preservation. There is love still lingering in what's been lost. A scarf still hanging where it always did. A coat that hasn't left its hook. A greeting left unfinished. We cannot hold on to people, but we can hold on to how we once lived with them in every quiet rhythm of our days. Losing isn't always the end. Sometimes it's simply another way to remember without needing to hold on. After so many quiet days, maybe you've also said it to yourself. I'm fine. Still making your own tea, still remembering the bill due dates, still stepping out into the garden each morning, even if you have to steady yourself on the railing. We all go through that phase, the time when we quietly resist acknowledging what's changing, not out of stubbornness, but because the heart simply isn't ready to admit that something is shifting. One time as he passed the bathroom mirror, Arthur, a friend from the care home, stopped for a long while. He said, "Sometimes I look in the mirror and see someone who's aging, but I don't know him. That man doesn't look like the me I used to be." Maybe you felt that too. Not because you're rejecting age, but because inside, you're still you. The same thoughts, the same stories, the same smile when someone calls you grandpa or grandma. But slowly, things no longer quite match. The world outside calls you elderly, senior, retiree. But inside, you just feel like someone, still living, still feeling, still wanting to be heard, not labeled. And then we react, not with anger, not with resistance, but by trying to do more, carrying your own shopping basket, changing the light bulb yourself, climbing up to reach the tea tin, even if your hands tremble. Because if you can still do it, you're still you, right? But then there comes a day, you step outside, trip over a step that's not even high. Your vision blurs. Maybe you forgot to drink water. And in that split second, the space between I'm fine and I'm trying to seem fine becomes crystal clear. We don't like admitting that. No one does. Because it's not just the body that changes, it's our sense of self that gets tested. That quiet haze over our pride. The feeling that we're no longer enough, no longer like before. But in that very moment, if we grow still enough, we might discover something gentle. No one ever said, you have to be who you once were. You don't need to be as strong as before to be cherished. You don't need to remember everything to be respected. You don't need to do it all to still belong. That quiet resistance, it's not wrong, it's instinct, trying to hold on to who we used to be. But sometimes, it's also what wears us out the most. Maybe it's time to ask a different question. Not, how can I be who I was? But, how can I live fully as who I am now? And that question opens a new door. A door that leads not back into the past, nor forward into pressure, but into a space where we no longer need to prove anything. Just to be here, completely. An ordinary afternoon. The sun wasn't harsh, the wind didn't howl, just a quiet light spilling over the porch, like so many other days. Mr. David sat on the front step, one slipper tilted to the side, an old cloth hat resting on his knees. No one called. No one asked. Not a sound. Then he leaned forward and picked up a teacup, one with a small chip on its rim. It belonged to Eleanor, his wife, who passed 3 years ago. Since the day she left, he hadn't thrown it away, but he never used it either. It just sat there on the wooden shelf beside a small photo taken one autumn long ago. But that day, without knowing why, he poured tea into that cup, set it gently on the table as if she were still sitting across from him. And as the steam slowly rose, he realized he didn't want to keep hiding anymore. He no longer wanted to deny that his eyes had grown dimmer, no longer wanted to pretend he didn't need a cane for the market walk, no longer needed to act like everything is still the same. He didn't cry. There was no sorrow, just a quiet, honest feeling, like someone had gently lifted an old coat off his shoulders. He rested his hands on his knees, looked down at the veined, wrinkled skin, and whispered to himself, slowly, tenderly. These hands once caught my son when he fell. They rebuilt the porch after the storm. They wiped Eleanor's tears and held hers on her last night. Now they tremble, but they are still my hands. When we pause long enough, stop running, stop resisting, we begin to see clearly. Wrinkles don't make us strangers to ourselves. Changes don't steal our dignity. They are simply proof that we have lived and are still living. Perhaps you too have had a moment like that. It doesn't take a great loss, just the morning light slipping through an old window, or the shuffling of someone's slippers passing outside. Or maybe just the other day when your grandchild asked, "Grandpa, why is your hair all white now?" And instead of feeling sad, you smiled, brushed their hair gently and said, "Because I've loved a lot, sweetheart." Sacred symbols don't only come from temples, statues, or sermons. They come from the tiniest things, things too quiet to ignore. A look, an object, an old habit. And when we pause long enough to truly see them, they become a mirror. Not one that reflects age, but one that reflects the soul. And in that moment, we no longer have to hold ourselves up. We only need to sit still to finally see ourselves. Some days, nothing particularly happens. You simply open your eyes, sunlight spills across the ceiling, and you no longer feel like you have to do anything. No more forcing yourself to follow the old routine. No more pushing your knees to walk that exact loop around the block, even when they ache. No more blaming yourself for napping through lunch or forgetting the porridge on the stove. You just exhale and accept. Accept that. You're no longer the one who rises at 5 a.m. for work. No longer the one who remembers every friend's birthday. No longer the one who could do 10 things in a day without feeling it in your hands. No one is forcing you. No one is judging you. It's just that, for years, you quietly carried the weight of trying to remain who you once were. And today, you choose to let go. Letting go is not giving up. Letting go is the way back to yourself with no more layers to protect or perform. Mr. Charles, a friend from a quiet suburb near Cambridge, once told me, "I can't garden the way I used to, but I still go out there every morning, bring my chair, and sit watching the leaves fall and the little sparrows dipping into the old bird bath. I no longer garden, but I am still present in my garden." Maybe that's a kind of rebirth, soft and quiet. Not from a distant vacation, not from a doctor's advice, but from that single moment of realization. You don't have to be anyone else. You get to choose again. Choose what still holds meaning. Choose to do less, but feel more. Choose silence, but show up fully. Choose who to call and who to let go. Choose to set down the endless shoulds so you can live with the gentle wants. That evening, Mrs. Helen, 78 years old, decided not to cook 5 dishes for dinner like she always had. She boiled some corn, reheated yesterday's soup, and made herself a cup of cocoa. Then she sat by the window and watched the sunset unfold slowly. No one scolded her, no one came to eat with her, but she said, "I felt more fully alive than I have in a long time." That is a kind of rebirth. It needs no applause, no certificate, no reason, just a quiet decision to step out of the person you were yesterday. Lighter, truer, and maybe you too are standing at that threshold. You don't have to do anything. Just pause, gently place a hand on your shoulder, and whisper softly to yourself, "I am still living in my own way." This afternoon, Mrs. Clara sat once again on the old wicker chair out on her front porch. The chair is worn now, one armrest chipped, strands of cane fraying in places. She once thought about throwing it out, replacing it with something newer, lighter, easier, but she never did, because that chair was where her husband used to sit and read the paper, where she would rest her legs holding a warm cup of tea, listening to the breeze rustling through the yard, where she once cradled her very first grandchild, humming a lullaby that no one remembers the name of, and today she sat there again. Not quite the same woman she once was, but not someone entirely new either. Just Mrs. Clara, someone who has lived through enough seasons to understand. Being still is also a full way of living. She no longer reads the newspaper each morning. Her eyes have grown dim. No longer prepares the grand meals she once did. Her hands aren't as steady, but she knows how to listen. To the cooing of doves on the roof tiles, to the scent of pomelo leaves drifting through the yard before it rains. She once thought old age was a slope, where the further you went, the more you lost. But now, she sees that it's only when we slow down that things truly come into view. Each morning she pours herself tea, not to stay alert, but to savor the scent of steam rising from hot water. Each meal she doesn't force herself to eat for nutrition, but chooses what makes her feel at ease. When her children and grandchildren laugh, she doesn't jump in to speak. She just watches quietly and smiles. Perhaps you too have returned to a familiar place. A kitchen you've always known, the front yard, an old radio humming softly in the background. And you realized those places, those objects, they haven't changed. But you now see them differently. You no longer feel the need to argue, to prove, to take notes. You simply listen. Listen to notice. The gentle clinking of bowls at a quiet dinner table is still a warm sound. A slow phone call from a friend can still soften the heart, and an unexpected hug from a small grandchild can light up an entire day. We don't need to search far to find life's meaning. It lives in the very smallest things, when we are still enough to see them with new eyes. Not the eyes of someone who used to be young, but the eyes of someone who is living, minute by minute, with their whole present heart. There's something strange, isn't there? The longer we live, the less we feel the need to speak. Not because we have nothing left to share, but because we begin to understand. Some things are felt just by the way we live. Mr. Harold, a friend who lives on the quiet edges of Bristol, is now 84. Every day without fail, he wakes at 5:30, prepares a pot of tea, washes his hands softly, and sits out on his porch. No phone, no radio, no words, just an old man sitting still, watching the sun rise through the leaves. At first, the neighborhood children thought he was just forgetful, but one morning a little boy brought a comic book and sat beside him. The next day another came with a flute. No one told them to come, but somehow every morning, Mr. Harold's porch began to fill with quiet footsteps and soft laughter. He never taught them anything, never told them how to live. He just sat, present, like a silent milestone in time. And in that stillness, people felt something rare, something real, without a single word. Elders often don't need to pass down wisdom as much as they need to simply live, truly, gently, honestly. And from there, the young will begin to see on their own. Mrs. Clara, the woman we followed from the beginning, now chooses just one task each day: to water the orchid by the window, not for beauty, not for praise, but because it makes her feel like she's caring for something still alive. One day, her 10-year-old granddaughter asked, "Grandma, why do you water the orchid every day, even when it rains?" She didn't answer right away. She simply smiled, then whispered, "Because the days we love should look the same, sweetheart." The little girl didn't fully understand, but the way her grandmother poured the water, the way she held each branch, taught more than any explanation could. Maybe that's how we know we've come full circle, from the person who had to do in order to feel worthy, to the one who simply is and whose worth shines quietly. To pass something on, we don't need a podium. We don't need to speak aloud. We just need to live, truthfully, intentionally, and kindly. The creases around your eyes, the gentle pace of your steps, the hand you offer someone as they pass through a doorway. All of it tells a story. No words needed. And if you today are living in such quiet days, please know you are not invisible. You are a small, steady flame, quietly lighting the way through the gentleness of your presence. Thank you for still sitting here, truly here. Because of that, those of us who are younger still know the way home. A gentle message for you who are walking through the most beautiful season of life. Maybe you no longer move as quickly as before, No longer remember every day of the week. No longer do everything you once could with ease and strength. But none of that takes away your worth. Because in every slower step, there is experience. In every quiet pause, there is deep listening. And in every wrinkle, every silver strand, shines the light of a life fully lived. You don't need to prove yourself, just to still matter. Because the way you simply are, quietly present, already lights the way for younger souls still learning how to walk. We learn how to live, not from lessons, but from the way you pour tea, gently, unrushed. From the way you stroke a child's hair, not with words, but with love. From the way you sit, quiet and still, peaceful as an old autumn afternoon. Please know this: growing older does not make you fade. It makes you clearer.